Nearly 2/3 of the NFL season have gone by, so it's now kind of clear which teams are contenders for the Super Bowl and which ones are definitely not. The NFL landscape still hasn't shown a clear-cut favorite to win it all, so that's why I have prepared these power rankings to have a much better idea on how teams stack up in an insanely competitive 2023 season. So right away at last place are the Carolina Panthers. 1 win through 11 games means they are now the first team this season to be guaranteed to finish with a losing record. They have shown some flashes of potential, but this team is still in rebuilding mode. The future may seem bright, but this season they are the worst team in the league. In 31st place, New England Patriots. I would have never thought they'd be this bad, but oh lord, here we are. This defense started out great and has since been kind of disappeared, but my real issue relies on the offense. Their display is just horrendous, terrible play calls, and even worse execution. Mac Jones, you better be learning Chinese, buddy, because this team I'm sure has sights set on Caleb Williams, James Daniels, just throwing some names out there. At number 30, Arizona Cardinals. Honestly, they're better than most people think, especially now that Kyler Murray is back. However, I cannot rank them any higher up when they only have 2 wins, but I'm confident they'll finish the season a couple of places higher up in the standings. Moving on, New York Giants. We all knew Daniel Jones was never a good quarterback, but losing him did seem as a bad blow. However, Tommy DeVito has seemed solid so far, and this Giants team isn't as bad as everybody thinks. Yeah, they are much worse than they were last year, but they still have a couple of playmakers who could serve as cornerstones of this franchise moving forward. Up next, Chicago Bears. At times they have shown to be a solid football team, but they are awful at closing games out and they just don't seem to know what they're doing. The talent is there and undeniable, so I'm sure they will figure it out someday, but so far they haven't done anything this season. I don't think they'll turn it around in 2023, but I'm confident this team will find its ground next season. At number 27, Tennessee Titans. They don't necessarily lack a lot of talent, but they do fail terribly on execution. They've had a couple of good victories this season, but they are truly going nowhere. Still, Will Levis does seem to be a viable option at quarterback moving forward, and the building pieces seem to be set for 2024 onwards. Moving on, New York Jets. They were never a playoff team, we knew that, but without Aaron Rodgers, they are even worse. This defense is solid, but still not elite, and when it comes to the other side of the ball, oh god. The Jets' offensive plays will cause any offensive coordinator to puke. It's truly embarrassing. In 25th place, Atlanta Falcons. They are honestly a well-balanced team, but haven't been able to put everything together. Somehow, they're still in serious contention to win the NFC South, but their chances have been hurt these past few weeks with 3 straight losses. But even without taking those into consideration, this is not a top-tier team, but rather a pretty average one. Up next are the Las Vegas Raiders. After a Week 1 victory, this team went down and crumbled, but since firing head coach Josh McDaniels, they seem as a completely new and revitalized team. I don't think they are near a playoff level team, but I wouldn't be surprised at all if they manage to win 3 or 4 more games in 2023. On to number 23, Los Angeles Rams. They started out the season quite strong, but just as last year, injuries have slowly picked this team apart. They are pretty much out of the NFC West race, being 3 games behind the Niners, but they don't have that bad of a record. There's talent, but they just somehow fail to win games. In 22nd place are the Green Bay Packers. This has been a weird team this season. Jordan Love sometimes feels as the quarterback of the future, and then he goes out and screws up big time. Overall, this is a solid team, and despite not being playoff contenders, I think their fans should be happy, because they're doing quite well considering this is a transitional year in the Bay. Coming up at 21, Washington Commanders. I honestly feel like they're slightly better than this record shows, especially considering they've lost a couple of painfully close games. Sam Howell has been pretty good and easily one of the most underrated players in the league, and despite coaching not being amazing, this team has still managed to stay somewhat afloat. Into the top 20 we go, Los Angeles Chargers. What is it with this team? You change a couple of plays and they are 9-1 with the first seed in the AFC, but instead they're last place in their division. They're a great football team plagued with talent all around, but I don't know what's going on in Brandon Staley's mind, let alone that. What is it that LA just doesn't know how to close games out? Change that for 2024 and this is definitely a Super Bowl team. Up next are the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They've held their ground when needed to. I'm not saying they've been amazing, but they did silence most haters, as most people thought they would be a bottom 5 team this season. Baker Mayfield is bad but not terrible, and the rest of the team is looking okay. I mean, they may not be elite, but they do have a pretty good chance at winning the AFC South come January. Now number 18, Indianapolis Colts. They honestly have one of the best offenses in the NFL. They just don't know how to actually win games. They're currently sitting at 5-5, and I feel like they're one of the most underrated teams out there. Still, they're not top top of the pack, and I would say they're one of the most average teams in the league. For 17th place, I have the Cincinnati Bengals. Losing Joe Burrow was a huge blow to this team. So much, I don't think they have a shot at making the playoffs anymore. They currently rank last place in the AFC North, and with how competitive the conference is looking, I fear Jake Browning is not someone capable of taking them to the postseason. On to number 16, Denver Broncos. They have been quite surprising during their little game winning streak. A couple of more games like that, and they are certainly in the playoff picture, which is definitely something we did not expect just a couple of weeks ago. Middle of the pack team, but there's definitely a lot of potential. Moving on, New Orleans Saints. With the amount of talent this team has, they should easily win their division. Yet here we are, still fighting a pointless battle. They are kind of lacking execution, but I do think they'll ultimately make the playoffs without too much trouble. Still, anything can happen. At 14th position are the Minnesota Vikings. A lot of people thought their season was over after Kirk Cousins went down, but then Joshua Dobbs came around. He's not nearly as good as the media presumes, but he's a good game manager, who has shown that this team has what it takes to win games. They may be a little bit too far from division contention, but playoffs are looking like a real possibility here. Sitting in 13th place are the Pittsburgh Steelers. They suck at absolutely everything besides winning, and hey, at the end of the day, that's the only thing that matters. Firing Matt Canada was a step in the right direction, but Kenny Pickett is still looking pretty bad. This roster should be fighting for a Super Bowl, but they just don't seem to get it together just yet. Coming up next, Buffalo Bills. They may be out of the playoffs for now, but counting them out would certainly be a mistake. I agree, they are no longer one of the powerhouses in the AFC, but they can still execute at a very high level. The issue with this team is consistency, but they 100% have what it takes to get into the postseason. Number 11, Cleveland Browns. This team is pretty interesting. The defense is truly impressive and easily top 3 in the league, whereas the offense is still trying to find an identity after losing 2 key players to injuries in Chubb and Watson. My honest take is they'll end up missing the playoffs because of that, but I wouldn't be surprised if they snuck in as a wildcard team. In 10th place are the Seattle Seahawks. They are not the most consistent team out there, but when they play to their full potential, they are a dangerous squad. The Seahawks may still compete for the NFC West down the wire, but regardless of that, I think they have a pretty safe spot in the playoffs as of now. Up next, Houston Texans. CJ Stroud is truly looking like the MVP right now, and this team is one of the hottest ones out there. They've had a couple of slips, which is why they aren't higher up, but being totally honest with you here, I think this Texans team could very well beat any of the teams above on this list any given Sunday. Very dangerous squad if they get into the playoffs. At number 8 are the Dallas Cowboys. When going against bad teams, they're looking like the 1972 Miami Dolphins, but when faced with real competition, they don't produce nearly quite as much. Still, that's not a reason to discredit the amazing production this team has had, and despite me not having them as a top 5 team, they are definitely one of the scariest squads out there. Up in 7th place, we have the Jacksonville Jaguars. Trevor Lawrence has now emerged as one of the best quarterbacks in the league, and this team has finally found its identity. Super Bowl contenders? Yeah, it seems like it, even though they still need to clean up a couple of things, starting with that blowout loss to the Niners. Now at number 6, Miami Dolphins. They had an amazing start to the season, but have since cooled off. They're still one of the most balanced teams out there, but it's still a little bit hard for me to believe they're the best team in the AFC. The potential is there, but it's not gonna be easy for this team to reach the Super Bowl. Cracking up the top 5, Detroit Lions. I'm honestly so happy for them. They're on track to have their best season probably in history, so Detroit fans should be very happy regardless of if they win the Super Bowl or not. And honestly, I think they have a pretty good shot at it, especially given that the NFC isn't nearly as strong as the AFC this season. Sitting at 4th place are the Kansas City Chiefs. Please tell me, where can I apply to be a wide receiver for this team? Like, I mean no hate, I truly don't, but an average high school receiving core is better than this. Outside of that, they're literally the best team in the NFL. Fix that and they beat both the Lions and Eagles. But there's no ifs in this league. And the truth is, this team has the potential to be number 1, and they also have the best player in football. But oh, they just love shooting themselves on the foot, don't they? Getting into the top 3, Baltimore Ravens. They've had their fair share of blowouts, while their only losses have come in pretty close games. Baltimore currently holds the number 1 seed in the AFC, and it's honestly not hard to imagine them getting to the Super Bowl come February. In 2nd position are the San Francisco 49ers. They had a pretty bad stretch, losing 3 games in a row, but I think that was a necessary humbling experience for Brock Purdy and company, you know, for disciplinary purposes. They seem to be back on track, and as long as they don't screw up, they have a clear path into the playoffs with arguably the best roster in the NFL. And so in 1st place, here come the Philadelphia Eagles. They lost to Zach Wilson, yeah, a fluke. Other than that, they are literally undefeated. Philly has been proving doubters wrong since week 1, and they not only hold the NFL's best record, but also have some of the best stats out there. Offense is amazing, defense seems great as well. This team is definitely a good one, and it seems pretty clear to me that winning the Super Bowl is their one and only goal this season. Anyways, that's all for today's video. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one.